When I saw my best friend with my sister in his arms, I realized that life would never be the same again. My name is Alex, and the story I'm about to share is one of the most painful and transformative experiences of my life. It's a story of betrayal, shattered trust, and a journey through emotional turmoil that altered my understanding of friendship and family forever. It began on a seemingly ordinary Saturday, but it quickly spiraled into a tumultuous experience that I was ill-prepared for. Ethan and I met in elementary school, and our friendship blossomed into something truly special. We were inseparable throughout our teenage years, sharing countless experiences and forming a bond that felt like it could withstand anything. Our families were also incredibly close, often spending holidays and vacations together. Ethan was more than just a friend to me, he was like a brother. We were each other's confidants, and our connection was one of the most significant relationships in my life. Lily, my younger sister, had always looked up to me. Our relationship was typical of many siblings. We had our fair share of disagreements, but we also shared a deep bond. She was a bright, ambitious young woman with a strong sense of independence, and I was proud of her achievements. Despite the occasional sibling squabbles, we supported each other, and I always felt a profound sense of responsibility towards her. That Saturday was supposed to be a day of relaxation and enjoyment. My parents were away on a weekend trip, and Lily had mentioned that she would be visiting her friend Sarah. I had planned to spend the day with Ethan, catching up and indulging in our favorite pastime, video games. It was a tradition we had maintained since childhood, and I was excited about the prospect of spending quality time with my best friend. As I prepared for Ethan's arrival, I noticed something unusual. Lily's car was parked outside the house. This struck me as odd because she had told me she would be out of town. I tried to dismiss the thought, figuring she might have changed her plans or come back early. I was focused on preparing for Ethan's visit and didn't want to let this minor detail distract me. Ethan arrived with his usual enthusiasm, and we quickly fell into our familiar routine. We set up the gaming console, exchanged jokes, and talked about our lives. However, throughout the evening, I noticed that Ethan seemed distracted. He kept checking his phone and casting nervous glances toward the hallway. His behavior was unusual, but I chalked it up to personal matters he might not have wanted to discuss. As the evening progressed, Ethan's odd behavior became more pronounced. He seemed increasingly preoccupied, and I could sense a palpable tension in the air. My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to check on Lily. I approached her room with a sense of apprehension. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear muffled voices inside. Hesitantly, I opened the door just a crack. What I saw through that narrow opening was a gut-wrenching sight. Ethan and Lily were sitting close together on her bed, their bodies touching intimately. They were whispering and laughing in a way that was unmistakably more than friendly. My heart sank as I realized the gravity of the situation. The betrayal was not only from Ethan, but also from my own sister. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Feeling numb and overwhelmed, I quietly closed the door and retreated to the living room. My mind was racing, consumed by a whirlwind of emotions, anger, confusion, and a deep sense of loss. I struggled to maintain a facade of normalcy as Ethan continued to engage in our gaming session. Every time he spoke or moved, it felt like a reminder of the betrayal I had just witnessed. My ability to concentrate was shattered, and I could barely focus on the game. That night was a blur of anguish. I couldn't sleep, and every time I closed my eyes, the image of Ethan and Lily together haunted me. The pain of the betrayal was overwhelming, and I felt a profound sense of loss. The trust I had in both Ethan and Lily felt irreparably broken. I kept replaying the scene in my mind, trying to make sense of what had happened and why. In the days that followed, I withdrew from both Ethan and Lily. The thought of confronting them was too painful. I avoided Ethan's calls and texts, unable to face him without feeling a surge of anger and hurt. My interactions with Lily were strained, and every conversation was filled with an underlying tension. The betrayal had created a chasm between us that seemed impossible to bridge. Ethan, sensing the distance, reached out to me and requested a meeting. Reluctantly, I agreed. I felt a sense of obligation to at least hear him out, despite my intense feelings of betrayal. We met at a local coffee shop, a neutral setting that felt less intimidating than meeting at home. The conversation was emotionally charged. Ethan expressed deep remorse for his actions and admitted that he had developed feelings for Lily over time. He explained that, despite knowing it was wrong, he felt overwhelmed by his emotions and found himself unable to resist. Ethan's apology was a mix of regret and justification. He acknowledged the wrongness of his actions, but tried to explain the emotional turmoil he had experienced. His explanations did little to alleviate the pain I was feeling. Our conversation ended on a somber note, with no clear resolution. The betrayal had created a divide that was difficult to overcome, and our friendship would never be the same. Facing Lily was an equally challenging experience. She reached out to me several times, trying to understand why I was distant. I finally agreed to meet her at a nearby park, hoping that the informal setting would provide a space for an honest conversation. The conversation was raw and emotional. Lily expressed deep remorse for her actions and struggled to justify why she had allowed herself to become involved with Ethan. Her apologies were heartfelt, but they did little to mend the fractured trust between us. As weeks turned into months, the emotional landscape shifted, but remained fraught with difficulty. My relationship with Ethan became strained. We made attempts to reconnect, but the lingering feelings of betrayal made interactions awkward. We tried to salvage some semblance of our old friendship, but the dynamic had irrevocably changed. Our once easy camaraderie was replaced by a cautious and guarded dynamic. Similarly, my relationship with Lily remained challenging. We made efforts to rebuild our bond, attending family therapy sessions together. The sessions were emotionally taxing, but ultimately provided a structured environment for us to work through our feelings and address the underlying issues. Through therapy, we explored the reasons behind her actions and worked on rebuilding our trust. Throughout this journey, I gained a broader perspective on the situation. The betrayal, while deeply painful, became a catalyst for personal growth. I started to reassess my values and the nature of trust. I realized that while I could never fully erase the past, I had a choice in how I responded to it. Forgiveness, I understood, was a crucial part of healing, not just for my relationships with Ethan and Lily, but also for my own emotional well-being. Gradually, my interactions with Ethan became less awkward. We learned to communicate more openly about our feelings and the changes in our friendship. It was a slow and challenging process, but it was necessary for us to move forward. We both acknowledged that the betrayal had altered our dynamic, but we also recognized the importance of working through the aftermath with a renewed sense of understanding and respect. Lily and I continued our efforts to repair our relationship. We attended therapy sessions together and worked diligently to address the emotional wounds left by the betrayal. The process was arduous, but it was essential for our healing. We explored the complexities of our relationship and sought to rebuild trust through honest communication and shared experiences. Through this journey, I gained valuable insights into human relationships. I learned that trust, once broken, takes time and effort to rebuild. The experience taught me the importance of empathy, communication, and confronting difficult truths. While the betrayal left lasting scars, it also provided valuable lessons about resilience and the capacity for growth. As I look back on that fateful Saturday, I recognize that the story of Ethan, Lily, and me is not just a tale of personal heartbreak, but also a testament to the enduring power of forgiveness and the human capacity for growth. The betrayal was a harsh lesson, but it also illuminated the path to understanding and empathy. The journey of healing continues, and while the scars remain, they serve as reminders of the strength and resilience that emerged from the depths of betrayal. In the end, I came to understand that while the past cannot be changed, the way we handle it can shape our future. The experience taught me to approach relationships with a greater sense of empathy and to value honesty and communication. Despite the pain, I emerged with a renewed appreciation for the strength and complexity of human connections. The journey of healing continues, and while the scars remain, they are a testament to the growth and resilience that emerged from the challenges we faced together. I always thought my brother was the perfect man until I found out that he was cheating on my wife and planning to destroy our family. I'm James, and the story I'm about to tell you is one of the most harrowing experiences I've ever faced. It's a story about betrayal, shattered trust, and the painful realization that the people closest to you can sometimes be the ones who hurt you the most. This story unfolded over several months, beginning with a series of unsettling events that eventually led to a devastating revelation. Growing up, I admired my younger brother, Daniel. He was always the one who seemed to have everything together, charismatic, successful, and admired by everyone who knew him. Our relationship was close, but there was always a sense that he was slightly ahead of me in terms of achievements and personal success. Despite this, I never felt any envy. I genuinely looked up to him and was proud of his accomplishments. As kids, we had an inseparable bond, the kind of connection that made me believe nothing could ever come between us. I thought of him as my best friend, my confidant. Daniel was the golden child in our family, always excelling in whatever he put his mind to, and everyone admired him. His charm was undeniable, and people seemed to naturally gravitate toward him. Whether it was our parents, friends, or even strangers, Daniel had a way of making people feel special. I, on the other hand, was more reserved, more focused on building a stable, quiet life for myself. I never envied Daniel's success or his way with people. I admired him for it. Our bond was strong, and I was proud of who he was. As we grew older, our lives began to diverge, but we remained close. Daniel moved to a different city to pursue his career in finance, and I stayed in our hometown, where I met Sarah. Sarah and I had been married for 6 years by the time all of this happened. Our relationship was built on mutual respect and love. We met during college, and from the moment I laid eyes on her, I knew she was the one for me. She had this magnetic personality, full of warmth and kindness. Everyone who met her instantly liked her, and she had a way of making people feel at ease. For 6 years, I thought we had the perfect marriage. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but nothing that ever made me doubt our connection. We were planning to buy a house together, and were even discussing starting a family. Everything seemed to be on track for a bright future. Daniel, despite living miles away, always stayed close to us, visiting frequently. Sarah and Daniel got along well from the very beginning, and I was glad that my brother and my wife had such a good relationship. They often joked around, shared stories, and bonded over mutual interests, and I never thought much of it. After all, it was my brother. Who better to be close with my wife? However, about 6 months ago, I started noticing subtle changes in both Daniel and Sarah's behavior. It started small. Daniel was coming over more often than usual, especially when I wasn't home. He claimed it was because he wanted to help us with house hunting, and I didn't think anything of it at first. He was my brother, and I trusted him completely. Sarah also didn't seem concerned, at least not outwardly, though she did mention that she thought Daniel was overstepping a bit. I laughed it off, assuming she was just tired from work. But then, Sarah began to seem more distant. At first, I thought it was stress from her job, or maybe she was overwhelmed by our upcoming move. I started noticing little things. She would be on her phone more often, smiling at texts that I never asked her about, and sometimes she seemed preoccupied or distracted when we were together. There were moments when she would withdraw emotionally, leaving me feeling like I was living with a stranger. I chalked it up to the stress we were both under, trying to make our house purchase go smoothly. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband who overanalyzes every small thing, but deep down, something gnawed at me, a feeling I couldn't shake. One evening, Daniel came over unexpectedly, again. I remember that night vividly. It was a warm evening in late summer. Sarah and I had just finished dinner, and I was sitting in the living room flipping through channels. Daniel showed up with a bottle of wine and suggested we all sit outside on the patio. I thought it would be nice to unwind after a long day, so I agreed. As we sat there, chatting and laughing, something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was a strange energy between Sarah and Daniel. It wasn't anything overt, but it was enough to make me feel uncomfortable. That night, after Daniel left, I asked Sarah if everything was okay. She brushed me off, saying she was just tired and didn't feel like talking. I didn't push her, but that gnawing feeling in my stomach grew stronger. The following weekend, I had to leave town for a work conference. I was gone for 3 days, and when I returned, I noticed Daniel had been over while I was away. I found his jacket draped over one of the chairs in the living room, and there were 2 empty wine glasses on the kitchen counter. I asked Sarah about it, and she told me they had watched a movie together while I was gone. It seemed innocent enough, but something about the way she said it felt off. There was a slight hesitation in her voice, as if she was holding something back. From that point on, I became more aware of their interactions. I began to notice small, seemingly insignificant things that started to add up. Text messages that she would quickly hide, the way Daniel's visits seemed to coincide with times when I was out, and the lingering glances between them that were impossible to ignore. It was subtle, but it was there. I tried to ignore it. I wanted to believe that I was just overthinking things, that my suspicions were unfounded. After all, this was my brother and my wife, 2 people I trusted more than anyone in the world. But as time went on, the signs became harder to ignore. Sarah became more distant, and Daniel's visits became more frequent. I found myself avoiding conversations with either of them because I was afraid of what I might hear. I didn't want to believe that there was something going on between them, but my gut told me otherwise. Then, one evening, it all came crashing down. I had come home from work earlier than usual, hoping to surprise Sarah with dinner. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Daniel's car parked outside. My heart sank, and I felt a surge of panic. I quietly entered the house and made my way to the living room. That's when I saw them, Sarah and Daniel, sitting together on the couch, their hands intertwined. They didn't see me at first, but when they did, the look on their faces told me everything I needed to know. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there, frozen, as they fumbled for words. Sarah started to speak, but I couldn't hear anything over the sound of my own heartbeat. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of nightmare. When I finally found my voice, I demanded an explanation. Sarah broke down in tears, while Daniel stood there, looking guilty and ashamed. They confessed that they had been seeing each other behind my back for months. Sarah told me that she had been feeling disconnected from me and had found comfort in Daniel. Daniel, for his part, admitted that he had developed feelings for Sarah and hadn't known how to stop. The pain I felt in that moment was indescribable. It was as if everything I had known, everything I had built with Sarah, had been torn apart in an instant. My brother, the person I had trusted most in the world, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And my wife, the woman I had vowed to spend the rest of my life with, had chosen him over me. In the days that followed, I was in a state of shock. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My mind was consumed by thoughts of betrayal and heartbreak. I replayed every moment in my head, trying to figure out where things had gone wrong. I questioned everything: my marriage, my relationship with Daniel, even my own sense of self-worth. I didn't know what to do next. Part of me wanted to cut both of them out of my life forever, but another part of me wanted answers. How could this have happened? Why didn't I see it coming? I decided to confront them both separately, hoping to get some clarity. First, I spoke with Sarah. We sat down at the kitchen table, and I asked her to tell me the truth. Everything. She confessed that it had started innocently enough, with Daniel offering her emotional support when she felt overwhelmed by work and our marriage. But over time, their connection had deepened, and they had crossed a line. She claimed that she still loved me and didn't want to hurt me, but she also admitted that she had developed feelings for Daniel. Hearing her say those words felt like a punch to the gut. I couldn't believe that the woman I had loved and trusted could do something like this. I asked her why she hadn't come to me, why she hadn't told me that she was feeling disconnected. She said she didn't want to burden me with her feelings and that she hadn't wanted to face the possibility that our marriage was in trouble. Next, I confronted Daniel. We met at a coffee shop, and the tension between us was palpable. I asked him how he could betray me like this, how he could go behind my back with my wife. He told me that he hadn't meant for it to happen, that he had tried to resist his feelings for Sarah but had ultimately failed. He apologized profusely, but his words felt hollow. I couldn't shake the feeling that he had known exactly what he was doing all along. As the weeks passed, I struggled to come to terms with what had happened. I sought therapy to help me process the emotions I was feeling: anger, sadness, betrayal. The therapist helped me understand that while I couldn't control what had happened, I could control how I responded to it. I began to focus on rebuilding my life, piece by piece. I filed for divorce from Sarah, and while it was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made, I knew it was the right one. Our marriage had been irreparably damaged, and I couldn't continue living a lie. As for Daniel, our relationship has never been the same. We barely speak now, and while I've tried to forgive him for what he did, the trust between us is gone. Looking back on everything, I've come to realize that betrayal can come from the most unexpected places. It's a painful lesson, but it's also one that has made me stronger. I've learned to value myself more and to set boundaries in my relationships. And while the scars of this experience will always be with me, I know that I can move forward and create a better future for myself.